Add one person to a team, and something strange happens. The team gets weaker. Not weaker at the hard parts, weaker at everything. You have sat in the meeting where 12 people nod at a plan, and then nobody does it. You have been on the group email where the answer is obvious, and the reply just never comes. You have watched a project with 6 owners quietly become a project with none, and you probably assumed it was bad luck, or bad people, or a bad week. It wasn't. It was arithmetic. There is a rule running underneath every team you have ever been on, and once you can see it, you cannot unsee it. The bigger the group, the less each person in it actually tries. Not because anyone decides to slack, because of something older and dumber than any decision. Let me show you where it was first measured. On a rope. More than a century ago, a French agricultural engineer named Max Ringelmann was doing perfectly ordinary work. He was studying how to get the most out of men, horses, and oxen, the engines of a farm. He published his findings in 1913, and folded inside that dry report was one experiment that has haunted every office ever since. He had people pull on a rope, not against another team in some tug of war, against a machine that measured the exact force coming down the line. First he measured them one at a time, then in groups. He was after a simple, obvious number. If one man pulls with a certain force, 2 men should pull with twice that force, and 8 men with 8 times as much. Add the arms, add the strength. What else could happen? Something else happened. A man pulling alone averaged about 85 kilograms of force. Call that 100%. One person giving everything he had. Now put 2 on the rope. Each one pulled at only about 93% of what he managed alone. Add a third, and each dropped to about 85%. And by the time 8 men were hauling on that rope together, each was pulling at only about 49% of his solo strength. Read that again. Half. 8 men, and each of them delivering half of what he could do standing there by himself. You added bodies to the rope, and the effort per body just leaked out. The team of 8 had roughly the strength of 4. This is the Ringelmann effect, and the first thing to notice is how ordinary it looks from the outside. More hands, less pull from each hand. Ringelmann himself had a tidy, sensible explanation for it. Coordination. 8 people can't pull at exactly the same instant, at exactly the same angle. They tug slightly out of sync. Some of the force cancels itself out, and the total suffers. Clumsiness, basically. And he was partly right, but only partly. Because think it through. If the loss were pure clumsiness, pure people getting in each other's way, then a person with nobody to get in the way of should pull at 100% every single time. So what happens if you take the coordination away, but keep the crowd? Somebody finally built that exact experiment. In 1974, a researcher named Alan Ingham, working with a small team, rebuilt Ringelmann's rope with one beautiful twist. He blindfolded the person doing the pulling and put them at the very front of the line. And behind them, out of sight, he placed assistants whose entire job was to pretend, to take hold of the rope and pull absolutely nothing. So the real person at the front was, physically, pulling completely alone. There was no one to sync with, no one to get tangled with, nothing in the world to be clumsy about. If clumsiness were the whole story, that blindfolded person should have pulled at 100%. They did not. Simply believing there were teammates behind them, people eased off, pulling at only about 85 to 90% of their solo effort. Nothing physical had changed. There was no real team back there. There was only the belief in a team, and the belief, all by itself, was enough to make the mind quietly loosen its grip on the rope. Stranger still, the fade leveled off fast. 1 imagined teammate or 5, it barely mattered. The mind lets go a certain amount the instant it thinks it's not alone, and then stops. That gap, the part of the loss that has nothing to do with clumsiness, is the real subject of this episode. And in 1979, 3 psychologists finally gave it a name. Their names were Bibb Latané, Kipling Williams, and Stephen Harkins, and they wrote it up in a paper with a genuinely great title. Many hands make light the work. Their experiment was almost insultingly simple. They asked people to make noise. Shout as loud as you possibly can. Clap as loud as you possibly can. Alone first, and then in groups. That's the whole task. There is no skill to it. You cannot get in someone's way while shouting. And still, the effort drained out as the group grew. A person clapping and shouting in a pair produced about 71% of the racket they made alone. In a group of 4, about 51%. In a group of 6, about 40% each. When the task was pure shouting, the groups of 6 sank even further, to around 36% per person. Nobody could be clumsy. Nobody was in anyone's way. And the crowd still got quieter per person the bigger it grew. They called it social loafing. And now we get to the part that matters, the actual gears. Because this is where it stops being a curious old study and starts being your Tuesday afternoon. Two things happen to a person inside a group. The first is that your effort goes invisible. On that rope, in that crowd, in that meeting, no one can isolate what you specifically contributed. And when your effort can't be seen, it can't be rewarded, and slacking can't be caught. The calculation your brain runs, silently, below the level of words, is cold and simple. Why pour everything into something no one can trace back to me when the result comes out the same either way? The second gear is darker, and it isn't about reward at all. It's about responsibility and how it divides. Bib Latané teamed up with another psychologist, John Darley, to study this in a completely different setting. They sat people in a room and let it slowly fill with smoke. Alone, most people got up and reported it quickly. But sitting in a group, surrounded by others staying calm, many said nothing at all. In another study, people heard someone over an intercom apparently having a seizure. The more other listeners they believed were on the line, the slower they were to go get help. Each person quietly assumes someone else had it handled. Latané and Darley called this diffusion of responsibility. In a crowd, the duty to act does not multiply, it splits. Divide it across enough people, and every person's share rounds down to nothing. So put the two gears together. Your effort is invisible, and your responsibility is shared. Of course you coast. The real question isn't why people loaf in big groups. It's why on earth a brain would be built to work this way. Why is the factory setting ease off? Because for almost the entire history of our species, you never worked in a crowd of strangers. We evolved in small bands. The anthropologist Robin Dunbar famously argued that our minds are tuned for something like 150 stable relationships, no more than that. And in a band that small, every hand was visible. If you didn't carry your share of the hunt, or the wall, or the water, everyone knew by nightfall, and it cost you. Effort was tracked, because it could be. Coasting was dangerous. The open plan office of 30 people, the all-hands call with 200 faces, the group thread with 14 names on it, that is simply not the world your instincts were built for. Drop a person into a group large enough that their individual effort disappears, and a very old switch quietly flips. It isn't laziness. It's an ancient, sensible rule firing in exactly the wrong century. Which is why, once you know its shape, you see the effect everywhere. The status meeting where 12 people attend and 2 people actually decide. The initiative with so many owners, it somehow has none. The bigger the group on the slide, the vaguer the answer to that one deadly question. So, who is actually doing this? And here is the part worth holding on to. It is not that some people are loafers and some people are workers. The very same person pulls at 100% when the task rests on them alone, and 49% when they're one of 8. Same person, same day. The situation changed, the character didn't. So what switches it back off? The exact reverse of what switched it on. The loafing dissolves the moment your effort becomes visible again and your responsibility stops being shared. Give a task a single name and watch the same lazy person come fully, startlingly alive. It was never really about how hard people are willing to work. It was about whether anyone could see the rope in their hands. So the next time you are sitting in a meeting that should have been an email and you feel yourself drift, quietly checking out while 11 other people quietly check out beside you, don't reach for the guilt. You are not a bad worker. You are a completely ordinary animal, doing exactly what 100,000 years wired you to do the instant your effort stopped being visible to the group. The weakness was never inside you. It was in the size of the room. Add a person to the rope, and the whole team pulls a little less. Put one name on it, and the person pulls again.